Thank you so much for having me. I'm Taunton Paine. I'm the director of the Scientific Data Sharing Policy Division in the Office of Science Policy, which is in the Office of the Director of NIH. So I think my plan for today is I'll talk a little bit about sort of where NIH data sharing policies are coming from and how they fit into kind of the broader context of federal scientific data sharing policies. And then I'll talk very briefly about sort of how we've gone about implementing this. So in terms of why NIH wants scientific data to be shared, I think if you read the preamble to the recent DMS policy, there's a lot there about why we want it to be shared, but fundamentally there are two basic reasons. So the first is that we want to advance the rigor and the reproducibility of the research that we support. Sharing data, helps to actually support validation of research results. And it also helps to make high-value data sets accessible for which there may have been fairly substantial public investment in. It also helps to accelerate future research directions by making data sets available earlier that might not have been made available at that point in time. And especially when scientific data are made available in a way that is findable and is citable, it helps to increase opportunities for citation and recognition of researchers' work. But there's also some public policy goals at work here as well. We want to promote public trust in the research that we support. Sharing data helps to foster transparency and accountability. It also helps to show sort of good stewardship over taxpayer funds, and it's another tangible product of research. I do think there's an ethical argument also that it helps to maximize research participants' contribution and recognizes the sacrifice that they make to participate in research. And it provides an opportunity to sort of reaffirm appropriate protections for research participants' data, which is something we've done in this policy, but I won't be touching on in great detail in this talk. So as Dan mentioned, there was a memo in August of 2022 that I'm sure most of you know about that talked about public access among other issues. It had sort of three main things, and the first one really was about publications, which I won't really touch on, but the second one was actually about scientific data and basically said that any federal department or agency that is doing research has to publish a plan for how they will actually implement these expectations, which is specifically to make scientific data available at the time of publication and to come up with an approach for how they will make available data from federally funded research that do not necessarily underlie publication. And then the third thing, which much, I think, kind of longer time frame, closer to sort of the middle of the decade and actually afterwards, is to come up with an approach for the collection of basically metadata and persistent identifiers for publications and a range of different objects. So those are closely related, I think, to each other, but there's more to expect there. So just recently, NIH published its plan back in February. It was open for public comment until earlier this week, but it is still publicly available, and we'll be looking at sort of next steps for turning that into actual policy. But I don't want to give you the impression that the data management and sharing policy that I'm about to talk about is sort of the first one we've had. We've actually had policies going back, as far as I know, to 1989 at the agency. Really, I think the first big one is the 2003 data sharing policy, which relates to large awards, so $500,000 per year or more. But we've also had more specific data sharing policies like the genomic data sharing policy that really focuses on specific types of research or data types. And in terms of how we've gone about developing this policy, Dan is absolutely right that the 2013 OSDP memo was really I think a powerful moment for getting agencies to develop data sharing policies, and many of them do have data sharing policies as a result of that 2013 memo, and we'll be updating them in response to this one. But we've actually been working on this particular policy since 2013 and went out for public comment multiple times. We actually issued it in final form in 2020. And gave people until this year to implement it in order to provide appropriate time for them to understand the expectations. So in terms of what the policy actually requires, it's pretty straightforward. It only has two basic requirements. It requires the submission of a data management and sharing plan with all applications for funding for research that generally will describe how, where, and when data will be shared. And then second, it requires compliance with the version of the plan that is approved by NIH. And we do say that compliance with that plan can affect future funding decisions. So it became effective for new applications submitted to the agency on January 25th, 2023, and later receipt dates. Ones that were submitted earlier or for ongoing awards will be sort of phased in over time. And while those are the two basic requirements, I think the important thing to understand about the policy is what it really asks people to do is to maximize appropriate data sharing, but it certainly recognizes that there are situations where data may have to be more limited in the way in which it's shared. So, logistically, how this will work is that the plan is submitted with the application for funding. So at the earliest possible moment, and that's really, very intentional choice. We want people to be thinking about data management and sharing and planning for that from the very beginning of the process. A brief description of the plan goes in the budget justification, and peer reviewers will see that brief description and the budget, but they will not see the full plan, so they will comment on it, but it won't factor into the final score. It's actually NIH program staff who will see the full plan and will make decisions about that. Plans can be updated during the application process if they have to be. They can also be updated during the award if there's a change in scientific direction or things like that. In terms of compliance, actual compliance with the plan will be a part of the term and condition of award, and we'll be checking in at sort of regular intervals, like in the reporting that happens at the end of the year. So I'll just stop there and point to sharing.nih.gov as sort of the main website where we've compiled guidance around different NIH data sharing policies, and this one included. Thanks.